This is Dr. Dunaway here with Chiro Strength. I'm here with Hunter today, and we're going to discuss 3 tips that will immediately make any squat better. And the first thing we're going to talk about is active hip flexion. The next thing we're going to talk about is a good rooting strategy with the feet. And the next thing we're going to talk about is how to properly get the hips and core connected so you're not descending into a squat that overloads the knees or overloads the low back. So, very simply, active hip flexion. So what we're going to do is Hunter's going to try and drive this dowel out through the ground, and I'm going to see how high he can get his right leg into flexion in the same kind of stance as you would be squatting. So depending on where your squat stance is at, that's the angle the knee's going to come up at. So Hunter, go ahead and smash that down through the ground. That's going to engage the core, and now go ahead and raise that leg off the ground. Good, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, good, 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 hold. Bend the knee a little bit. Good. So right now we have just above 90 degrees. And hold, good, relax. Can you face that way and show the same thing? So what we're looking for is if he cannot get this hip flexed actively into the same amount of depth that he's squatting in, good. Bend the knee a little bit, good. Hold that. Hold. Good. So the core's engaged, so he keeps a nice, good, straight spine. Go ahead and let this come down. I don't want to see an active hip flexion where the lumbar spine's flexed. But the idea being, if he can only go up to about a little less than 90 degrees. So if active hip flexion, keep going, keep it stop. If his active hip flexion is right here, which is just below 90 degrees, and then he's squatting, but his squat is more this kind of well beyond a 90-degree squat, that means he's going to be hanging out on ligaments and tendons and not being able to really support the bottom of that squat pattern. So we will work with active hip flexion with that kind of person until they can get their active hip flexion to meet their squat depth on both legs. Because what you'll notice is one side will often feel less stable than the other side. A little kind of progression of this, if we're trying to strengthen that hip flexion, a little kettlebell here, and he can just slide his toe in, lock the core in, make sure it doesn't brace, and slowly bring that up. So go ahead and come up. Good. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Good, 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 good. Hold. Make sure we don't come out of good spinal positions. Good. Come back down. And we can do that either as holds or reps. So moving on next to the rooting strategy, what we'll do, Hunter, I was going to have you face the camera and go through just a normal, back a tad bit here. Just go through a normal body weight squat. So we'll assess the body weight squat, and we'll see if he's rolling to the inside or outside of his feet. Go ahead, normal squat for me. Good, come back up. Good, so he doesn't appear to be rolling anywhere, but let's say we saw this foot collapsing in. So what we're really wanting to do with a rooting strategy is really push through the ground in 3 different areas. One, right underneath the big toe knuckle, or kind of the webbing of the first and second toe. The little toe knuckles here, and then the heel. Those 3 areas, I want to think about pressing through equally. If you ever feel like you're coming off of those areas, we're going to be overloading the knee, putting the ankle, knee, and hip complex in a poor position. So the foundation is very important here. So if he was collapsing in on that knee, and we see that valgosity there, I'll put this right underneath these little toe knuckles. And now when he squats, go ahead and squat, I'll tell him to make sure, as I try to pull this out, to keep this pinned. Just a little neural feedback for him to think about keeping that foot rooted. So let's say he overcompensated and now he's trying to really do a really good job of keeping that pinned, but he comes up. Now what I'll do, I'll put a band underneath that big toe knuckle, and I'm just trying to pull this apart as he goes through a squat. And as he goes through a squat, trying to make sure he can keep both of those pinned and keep in a nice, good rooted position throughout the squat, maintaining that good foot contact. Now, Hunter, I'm going to have you get that bar on your back. Lastly, what we're going to find a lot of times with the squat is that you will be very knee dominant. And come forward real quick. So if I'm assessing Hunter's squat and I just don't give too many commands, I try to get him in a neutral spine first so there's no arch to start with. And I'll say, Hunter, go ahead and squat. I'm going to ask Hunter to show me a knee dominant squat. So go ahead, stop. So you can see the very first couple inches he goes down, his torso is still upright, and he started to bend forward with his knees. His knees are already over his toes, which is going to be very difficult on the knees as you go through the rest of the squat. So what I'll cue you to do, come back up. The first 6 inches to maybe a foot of the squat should look very much like a deadlift, meaning you're going to load the hips and try to get you so this bar is not going to change directions here. So you're not doing a good morning or anything, but as you put the butt back, good, what you'll see is he can load the hips, and now after you load the hips, pull yourself with that active hip flexion straight into that squat. So go ahead, load the hips, now pull yourself down. Good squat pattern there, come back up. And that's gonna be a good finished squat. Now, when you talk about pushing the butt back, you can use a few cues like pushing a drawer shut, but what you wanna make sure you're not doing is having someone come out of this neutral spine. And what I want you to do is I want you to do the bad girl here. And so you get a lot of hyperextension here because they push the butt back. Come back up. You want to make sure as they load the hips, the spine and hips stay in a good neutral position. Load the hips, good, boom. So a nice good neutral position with the spine, then pull yourself down as opposed to this hyperextension with the lumbar spine that you'll see a lot of times when people try to load the hips like this. All right, honey, put that down. So those are the 3 drills that I'll usually cue people to do to kind of work through a good solid squatting pattern, making sure you got active hip flexion, a good rooting strategy, and then a proper hip hinge to load the glutes before you pull yourself down. And for the average person, that will really drastically improve your squatting mechanics without having to cue knees out, without having to cue spread the floor apart, because those can often be misinterpreted and end up having poor mechanics throughout the squat. So, any question with this? Please shoot me an email at drdunaway@chirostrength.com. You can comment below on this video. I'll be happy to answer questions there. And like I always say, don't just mend, transcend. Thanks, guys.